Hello. I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return not urgently, but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated. And it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This space is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long, lived-in life. So take a slow breath, let your body soften into the bed, and allow this night to meet you where you are. Before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. You're lying here now, in this quiet room, in this familiar bed, and the day is finally over. The demands have dissolved, the conversations have ended, the responsibilities have been set down like a heavy coat at the end of a long walk home. And what remains in this stillness, what is left when everything else has been set aside, is you. Simply you. With your thoughts, with your years, with the extraordinary, irreplaceable accumulation of a life fully and honestly lived. This is the ritual that belongs only to this hour, the bedtime review. Not a ledger of regrets, not a tally of failures, not an audit of what should have been done differently or sooner or better. No, this is something far gentler than that. This is the quiet, unhurried act of looking back, of placing your hand upon the pages of your own story and feeling how real each chapter was, how necessary, how completely and thoroughly yours. Every night, whether you name it or not, something in you wants to do this. Something in you, in those private minutes between lying down and falling into sleep, turns inward, begins to walk slowly backward through the long corridors of your life, pausing here, pausing there, lifting moments like smooth stones from a riverbed, holding them in the palm of memory, turning them over in the faint light, recognizing their weight and their texture and their truth. Tonight, we are going to do that together, slowly, gently, with all the care and tenderness that a life this long and this full deserves. So close your eyes if they are not already closed. Feel the full weight of your body settle into the mattress beneath you. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your jaw release. Let your hands rest open and soft on either side of you. no longer gripping, no longer holding on. You have carried so much today. You have carried so much this year, this decade, this lifetime. You are allowed to set it all down right now, just for these hours, just for tonight. You are allowed to simply be present in this body, in this room, in this moment, without needing to carry anything at all. And as you rest here in this growing stillness, I want you to consider for a moment what it means to be exactly where you are in life. Not in terms of circumstance or health or what remains on the list of things still to be done, but in terms of depth, in terms of how much you have seen, how much you have understood, how much of the world has moved through you and around you and because of you over all these years. You have lived through eras. You have lived through seasons that younger people have only read about in books or heard described by others. You carry knowledge that cannot be taught in any classroom, earned in any course, or transmitted through any screen. You carry the profound and particular wisdom that comes only from repetition, from living something more than once, from making a mistake and surviving it, from loving someone and losing them and finding a way to continue, from beginning again in seasons when beginning seemed not only impossible, but almost cruel. This is not a small thing. This is not ordinary. What you carry tonight, as you lie here in the gentleness of this quiet dark, is remarkable. It is the full and irreducible weight of a life, and it is worthy not only of acknowledgement, but of genuine, patient, unhurried reflection. Let the room grow even quieter in your mind now. Let the sounds of the house settle around you like familiar music you no longer have to listen to consciously because you know it so well. The hum of an appliance, the tick of something cooling or expanding, a door breathing in its frame. These are the sounds of your world, this ordinary, particular, precious world that holds you tonight. And now, let memory begin to move. Take your mind back, not urgently, not with effort or direction. Simply allow it to drift the way water finds its own path, downhill, unhurried, following the landscape of your own interior, and let it carry you first to the very beginning, to childhood, to the earliest version of yourself that you can still reach. You were young once, so young that the world was enormous and largely unexplained. So young that your own name still felt new in your mouth, still felt like something given rather than something earned. You had a bed, a room, a place that was yours for sleeping. And in that place, someone put you to rest at the end of the day. Someone older and larger and responsible for your safety came to you in the evening and made sure you were settled. A mother, a father, a grandparent with soft hands, an aunt or uncle who smelled like something familiar and specific. Someone who told you, in words or simply in action, that it was time to sleep. Do you remember that? The particular quality of childhood evenings, the way the light changed at the end of the day, going softer, going golden, going finally dark. The way the house quieted around you as night came on. The way the day, however plain and ordinary it had been, had a kind of ceremony to its ending. Shoes off, dinner eaten, bath taken, into bed. These small rituals that held the shape of your early life together. You remember the smell of that house. You do not have to try to remember it. It is already there, waiting for you in the quiet. The particular smell of the kitchen on an evening, the soap your mother used, or the aftershave your father wore, or the particular scent of your grandmother's house that was unlike any other place in the world. Every home has a smell that belongs only to it, only to those walls, only to those people, only to that time. And yours has never truly left you. It lives somewhere deep in your memory, in the oldest and most protected part of your interior, and it surfaces on quiet nights exactly like this one. You were small then, and the world was full of things you did not yet understand. Adults move through your life with authority and a mystery you accepted without questioning because there was no other option. They knew things you did not know. They carried concerns and worries they did not explain to you because you were a child and the worries were not yours to hold. They made decisions that shaped your days without ever consulting you, and you moved within those decisions as naturally as water moves within its banks. And there was beauty in that. Even now you can feel it, the particular grace of being young, of being protected, of having your biggest worries be manageable ones, of being held inside a structure that someone else maintained. There was beauty in the trust of it, in waking each morning and believing without effort that the people who cared for you would still be there, that the world, at least the small version of it that constituted your daily life, would remain intact. But childhood also had its hardnesses. You know this. Looking back from here, from this long and honest distance, you can see them clearly. The things that were difficult, the confusion you felt in moments that no one thought to explain, the times when the adults around you were limited by their own struggles, their own histories, their own unresolved difficulties, and when those limitations landed on you in ways that left marks. The times when you felt unseen or misunderstood, or simply alone inside your own young experience in ways that no one noticed. You can hold all of this tonight without bitterness, because from this distance, from the full and generous view that only age can provide, you can see those difficulties for what they truly were: formative, instructive, the very experiences that taught you to reach deeper, to develop resilience that a completely sheltered life would never have required. The hardships of childhood did not ruin you. They contributed to the structure of who you became. They are woven into the foundation as surely as the beautiful memories are. Think of one specific memory from those early years. Do not choose it deliberately. Simply allow one to rise the way a single leaf rises in still water without being pushed. A morning, a particular afternoon, a face that mattered to you, a room, a yard, a street corner, a classroom. Let it come without judgment, without editing, without needing it to be anything other than what it was. Stay with that memory for a moment. Let it be full and three-dimensional. Let yourself be present inside it. You were there. You were genuinely present in that moment, living it for the first time, not knowing yet how it would feel to look back on it from this distance. And it shaped you. That ordinary, forgotten, unremarkable moment shaped you in ways so subtle and so deep that you may never be able to fully trace them. This is the quiet miracle of the Bedtime Review. This is what it offers that no other practice can. The chance to return, to stand inside moments that formed you and to look at them with the eyes you carry now. Older eyes, softer eyes. Eyes that have seen enough to understand that most things were more complicated than they appeared at the time, and more valuable and more tender than they seemed while you were living through them. You grew, as children do. You grew, and the world expanded around you in ways both thrilling and frightening. New places, new people, new versions of yourself emerging season by season. The way a tree puts out new growth each spring while the rings of previous years accumulate unseen inside. The child gradually gave way to the questioning young person. The easy acceptance gave way to uncertainty, and with that uncertainty came the great swelling questions of adolescence and early adulthood. Who are you? What do you want from this life? What is the world asking of you? And what will you answer? What will you become? These questions arrive before you have any real tools for answering them. They arrive when you are still discovering your own face in the mirror, still testing your own voice in conversation, still learning what your own presence feels like in a room full of other people who are doing the same thing. You navigated all of that. Somehow, with the resources available to you, with the guidance you received and the guidance you had to invent for yourself, you made your way through the enormous uncertainty of becoming. And tonight, from this distance, you can look back at that young person with a tenderness that perhaps you could not feel in any younger decade. That young person was trying so hard, was figuring it out in real time with no guarantee of the outcome, was showing extraordinary courage simply by continuing to move forward into a future that offered no certainty. They did their best. You did your best. And here you are. Now let memory carry you forward into the years of early adulthood, those years of first freedoms and first real responsibilities arriving at the same time, which is its own particular kind of overwhelming. The first home you made for yourself, the first choices that were entirely yours, where no parent held final authority, where no one else carried the weight of the decision. You stepped into your own life and you began, tentatively at first, and then with growing confidence, to furnish it. Some of those choices worked beautifully. You made decisions that opened doors you hadn't known existed, that led you to people and places and experiences that enriched everything which followed. You took risks that paid off in ways you hadn't dared fully imagine. You trusted your instincts when they turned out to be sound. You built things, a career, a friendship, a skill, a household, slowly, with effort, and with the particular satisfaction that comes from making something out of nothing. You constructed a life that was recognizably yours, and some of those choices were hard. Some of them led you somewhere painful. Some cost you things you hadn't expected to lose. Some left marks that took years to heal, and some of those marks never healed completely, but simply became part of you, like a scar that no longer hurts, but remains visible. Some choices you look back on now and think, I would do that differently. I know better now. I understand what I didn't understand then. But here is the truth about every choice you made in those early years, the sound ones and the ones you'd revise equally. They were real. They were genuinely yours. They were made by a person who was fully alive and sincerely trying, who was working with the information and the maturity and the emotional capacity available to them at that precise moment in time. You could not have known then what you know now. No one can. Understanding comes through living, not before it. You made those choices. You lived their consequences. And you learned. The learning is what matters. The learning is what you carry forward tonight into this bed, into this reflection, into this honest and unhurried review of everything the years have taught you. Think now about work, about the long middle years that you gave to what you did in the world. Whether you loved your work with a deep and abiding passion, or whether you simply did what needed to be done to sustain your life and the lives of those depending on you. Whether you built a career with careful intention or found your way forward day by day without a clear map, the years you gave to working were not minor. They were substantial. They consumed a significant portion of the hours you have been given on this earth. What did you make in those years? Not merely in the literal sense, not only the tangible products of labor, but what did you contribute in the larger sense? What problems did you help to solve? Whose days were easier or safer or better because of what you brought to your work? There are people alive today who do not know your name, who would not recognize your face, whose lives were nonetheless touched and shaped in some small way by what you did during those long working years. A decision you made, a service you provided, a moment when you went slightly beyond what was required because something in you insisted on doing the thing properly. Your work mattered, even on the days when it felt entirely routine, even on the mornings when you drove to work or walked to work or sat down at your desk and felt nothing but the weight of obligation. It mattered because you were there, because you gave something of yourself, day following day, year following year, in an act of sustained commitment that deserves recognition. And if you have retired now, or stepped back from the years of active working life, there may be a particular and specific tenderness available in looking back at that time. The colleagues who became something like a second family, the routines that provided structure to your weeks, the sense of purpose that came from being needed, from having somewhere to be and something to contribute. All of that was real. All of that was part of the fabric of your life, and it is worthy of being honored, even quietly, even privately, in this night's review. You showed up. For years and years and years you showed up. Whatever else is true, that is true, and it is not a small thing. Now let the review bring you gently to the people, because a life, any life, is not ultimately made of years or accomplishments or decisions. A life is made of people, the people you loved and the people who loved you, the relationships that held you and shaped you and challenged you and asked the most of you, the connections that gave your days their deepest meaning. Think about the loves of your life, not only romantic love, though certainly that too, the full spectrum of love that has moved through you across the decades, the love of parents, and the particular ache of realizing they were only human. The love of lifelong friends who knew you across so many versions of yourself that they hold a kind of irreplaceable witness to your whole story. The love of children, if you had them, that ferocious and bewildering love that arrived the moment they did and never diminished, never simplified, never became anything other than enormous. The love for a mentor who believed in you before you believed in yourself. For a neighbor who became unexpectedly essential. For a stranger whose one act of kindness arrived at exactly the right moment and stayed with you for decades. Love has come to you in so many forms, and you have known enough of them to understand something that only living can teach. That love is the thing. That all the accomplishments and acquisitions and achievements of a life are context, and love is the content. That what you remember in the quiet of nights like this one is never the things you owned or the titles you held. What you remember is faces, voices, the feeling of being truly known by another person, the warmth of genuine connection in a world that can be very cold. You have been loved, perhaps not always perfectly, perhaps not always in the precise way you needed, perhaps through losses that arrived too soon, through departures that were never adequately explained, through the grief that is the price of loving mortal people in a mortal world. But you have been loved. You have been seen and chosen and valued and held by people who did not have to love you, but did. This is one of the great facts of your life. Let it be a great fact. Let it sit fully in you tonight as you rest. And you have loved in return. You have given yourself. You have stayed awake worrying about people who may never know you did. You have sacrificed your own comfort, your own sleep, your own preferences and plans for the sake of someone else's well-being or happiness or safety. You have listened when listening was difficult. You have shown up in the hard moments. The hospital rooms and the funerals and the phone calls had inconvenient hours when someone needed a voice they trusted. The love you have given did not disappear when the moment of giving was over. Love does not work that way. It moves. It passes from person to person, carried forward in ways that cannot always be traced. The love you gave your children lives in how they move through the world, in the gentleness or the strength or the perseverance they carry without always knowing where it came from. The love you gave to friends lives in how they think of you on quiet evenings. The love you offered to anyone at any moment, in any form, went somewhere. It became something. It is still quietly working in the world tonight, long after the moment it was given has passed from both your memories. You are resting now. You feel the settled weight of the blankets, the warmth that has been building around your body since you first lay down, the darkness that is not frightening, but deeply familiar, like the face of something that has always wished you well. And in this warmth, in this known and comfortable dark, you can feel the fullness of what you have lived. Not just its length, its fullness, its richness, the extraordinary number of things that have happened to you and through you and because of you across all these years. You have been present for a remarkable amount of life. And this, too, is worth saying quietly to yourself as you lie here. You were present. You showed up not just for the celebrations and the triumphs, but for the ordinary days, the unremarkable Tuesdays, the weeks that seemed to pass without anything notable occurring and that turned out later, in hindsight, to have been some of the most precious time of your life. The ordinary days, the daily bread of a life, the mornings of coffee and small conversations, the evenings of familiar meals in familiar rooms with familiar people, the routine drives and the regular appointments and the predictable rhythms of a life that was building itself quietly and continuously while you were busy living it. Those ordinary days were not nothing. They were, in many ways, everything. They were where the love actually lived. Not in the grand moments, but in the accumulation of small ones. In the 10,000 ordinary gestures and conversations and shared meals and unremarkable evenings that, added together, constitute the true texture of a life, of your life. Think of one ordinary day, anyone. Let one surface now, not a birthday or an anniversary or a day you know you should remember. Let the most ordinary day you can access rise to the surface. A Tuesday in some unremarkable year, the particular light, the particular small concerns, the face of someone you saw every day and may have barely noticed because they were simply there, simply part of the ordinary fabric of things. That day was real. You were real inside it, and it is part of who you are tonight. Lying here in this bed, in this room, in this life that is made of all those Tuesdays added together. The covers are warm around you now. Your breathing has slowed without your having to instruct it to do so. Your body is beginning to remember that its work for the day is finished, that what is required of it now is simply to rest and restore and prepare for whatever morning brings. Let the review settle for a moment. Let the memories you have visited in this first half of our evening together simply rest in you, without urgency, without judgment, without the need to be resolved or explained or concluded. They are simply yours. They are simply part of the story. The beginning chapters, the middle chapters, the long and layered accumulation of a life in the process of being fully understood. You have looked at childhood and its textures. You have revisited the confusion and the reaching of becoming an adult. You have honored the work you gave to the world. You have returned to the people who loved you and the love you offered in return. You have allowed the ordinary days their proper weight. This is the practice, not to force meaning, not to construct a narrative that makes everything seem intentional or resolved, but simply to look, to acknowledge, to witness your own life with the same patience and generosity you would offer to someone you love. That is what tonight is. That is what this quiet hour is for. The honest, gentle, unhurried act of witnessing your own remarkable, imperfect, irreplaceable life. So rest now in what you visited tonight. Let the memories soften at their edges. Let them become what they truly are. Not burdens requiring your continued attention, not bright objects insisting on being analyzed, but simply the landscape of a long and genuine human life. A landscape you have earned the right to walk through slowly, in your own time, in exactly this kind of quiet. The second half of our journey together waits for you. More reflection, more of this honest and loving review. the deeper layers still to be uncovered, the wisdom still to be recognized and honored. But for this moment, simply breathe in through the nose, slowly, feeling the breath fill you, and out through the mouth, long and quiet, letting everything soften with each exhale. You are here. You are resting. You have lived something real and something large. And tonight, it is enough simply to know that, simply to feel it, simply to be present inside the fullness of a life that is still, even now, yours. You are still here, still breathing, still held by this bed, this room, this quiet that has only deepened since we began. The first half of tonight's review has moved through you like a slow tide, touching the early shores of your life, the years of becoming, the working years, the loves that defined you, the ordinary days that built everything quietly from the inside out. And now the tide moves deeper, into the waters that take more courage to enter, into the parts of the story that carry the most weight, into the hard-earned wisdom that only a life fully lived can produce. This is the second half of the ritual, and it asks a little more of you. Not effort, not performance, simply willingness. The willingness to look honestly at what remains to be seen, to sit with what is complicated, to honor what is unresolved, to find, in the full and honest accounting of your years, not a perfect record, but something far more valuable, a true one. So breathe again, long and slow, in through the nose, filling the chest, filling the belly, and out through the mouth, releasing everything that does not need to be held right now. You are safe in this bed. You are protected in this darkness. Whatever arises in this second half of the review, it cannot harm you. It can only offer you understanding. And understanding at this stage of life is one of the most generous gifts there is. Let us continue. There are things you never said. This is the quiet truth that visits many people in the private hours of bedtime, when the usual distractions have been stripped away, and what remains is the unfinished business of the heart. The words that formed in your throat and never quite made it out. The apologies that waited for the right moment, and then the right moment never came. The expressions of love that felt too large or too vulnerable to speak aloud. The gratitude you carried silently for someone who may never have known they were being carried. The explanations you owed, the truths you withheld because the timing felt wrong, and then time itself ran out. These unsaid things live inside you. They have for years, perhaps for decades. And on quiet nights like this one, they rise, not to torment you, not to indict you, but because they are still part of your story, and your story deserves to be told completely, even here, even silently, even to no one but yourself in the dark. Think now of one person to whom something important was left unsaid. You do not have to name them out loud. You do not have to construct the words or imagine delivering them or resolve anything that cannot be resolved tonight. Simply let that person's face come into the room with you for a moment. Let them be present in the gentle way that only memory allows, without the complexity of actual presence, without the risk of real conversation, simply as they were. Simply as you knew them in your best and clearest recollection of who they were. And in this quiet space, in this private interior place where only you can go, let the unsaid thing be said. Not perfectly, not eloquently. However it comes, however incomplete, however tangled with other feelings it might be, let it exist here. Let it be real here, in this room, in this night, because the person may be gone. The moment may have passed beyond any practical recovery, but your need to say it has not passed, and saying it here in the privacy of your own resting heart is not nothing. It is not pretend or hollow. It is a genuine act of completion, a way of honoring both them and yourself, a way of setting down something you have carried long enough and perhaps did not know you were still carrying until this very moment when it surfaced. You're allowed to release this tonight. You have earned that release. You have carried it with faithfulness and with love. And both of those things are honored now, simply in your willingness to acknowledge what was never spoken. That is enough. Let it be enough. Now let the review bring you gently to the mistakes. Not all of them. Not as a comprehensive inventory or a formal accounting of every regret. Simply the ones that still live close to the surface. The decisions you made that caused pain you did not intend. The moments when you were less than you wanted to be. Less patient, less kind, less present than the situation asked of you. The times when someone needed you and you were unavailable, not cruelly, not deliberately, but simply absent in the ways that busy and struggling people sometimes are, because they are human, and humans have limits, and life makes demands that do not always allow for perfect presence. You made mistakes. Of course you did. Every person who has lived long enough to hold this kind of review has made mistakes of consequence, has said something that left a mark on another person's life, has chosen wrongly in ways that sent ripples outward, has failed to show up in ways that mattered deeply, has let something important slip away not by intention, but by inattention, which in some ways carries its own particular sadness. But the question tonight is not whether you made mistakes. The question is what you did with them. Whether you let them teach you. Whether you allowed the understanding that came from getting something wrong to actually change how you move through the world afterward. Whether the error became, in time, a form of education that shaped a wiser and more careful version of you. You did learn. Not immediately, perhaps. Not without the natural resistance of a human heart being asked to look directly at its own failures. Not without some period of time in which it was genuinely easier to look away from what had happened than to face it squarely. But eventually, in the way that honest people do, you looked, you saw it clearly, and you adjusted. You became more careful in the places where you had been careless, more thoughtful where you had been impulsive, more tender where you had once been harder than the moment required, more willing to speak the important thing while there was still time to speak it, because you had learned in the most direct way possible what the cost of silence could be. Your mistakes made you more human, not less worthy of the rest you are taking tonight, not less deserving of the warmth of this bed, or the peace of this room, or the tenderness of this review. They made you more complete. They gave you the specific kind of compassion that can only come from having been wrong and knowing it, from having caused pain and sat with the knowledge of having done so, from having rebuilt something after breaking it, or from having lived with what could not be rebuilt and finding a way to continue bearing that knowledge without letting it define you entirely. You are not your failures. This is important. You are not the sum of what went wrong. You are what you became in the slow and honest aftermath of what went wrong. And what you became is sitting here quietly in this review, in this bed, in this life that continued despite everything. That continuing is its own kind of answer. That continuing is proof of something. Let the review carry you now toward the losses. Because a life this long accumulates. Losses the way a shoreline accumulates weather. It is not possible to have lived this much, to have loved this many people, to have invested this deeply in places and times and precious chapters of a life, without losing some of what you loved most, without watching some of what you built come down, without saying goodbye in ways both formal and informal, to people and places and earlier versions of yourself that you were not ready to release. You have lost people. This is perhaps the deepest and most particular truth of having lived a long life. The thing that changes the interior landscape most fundamentally, most permanently. The people who were part of your world for so long that you had stopped being able to fully imagine the world without them are gone. A parent who held you at the very beginning of your life and gave you your first experience of what it meant to be loved before you had done anything to earn it. A friend who carried the decades alongside you, who witnessed so many versions of you that they held a kind of irreplaceable archive of your whole becoming. A partner, perhaps, whose absence has rearranged every ordinary moment of daily existence, every meal eaten alone, every evening that ends in a silence that was once shared conversation, every small decision that was once made together. These losses are real. They are not things that time fully heals, despite what well-meaning people say in the immediate aftermath of grief. They are things that time teaches you to carry. Things you learn to integrate, not by getting over them, but by slowly growing larger around them, by expanding the interior life until there is room inside you for both the loss and the continuing, for both the grief and the gratitude, for both the person who is gone and the life that remains and asks to be lived with whatever fullness you can still bring to it. On this night, in this bed, you are not alone in your losses. They are present with you. The people you have loved and lost are present in this room in the way that only lost people can be present, through memory, through the permanent changes they made in you simply by having been part of your life, through the specific ways they shaped how you think and speak and love and move through the world. They are woven into your texture. Their absence is a real and ongoing fact, but their presence in you is also real and continuous, and it does not end with their departure from the visible world. Let yourself feel their presence for a moment. Not the absence, the presence. The way a person's specific manner of laughing lives on in your body as a felt memory that can return without warning when something reminds you of them. The way the things they taught you still work in you, still quietly guide choices you make without always consciously knowing where the guidance comes from. The way their love, when it was given to you, expanded your capacity for love in ways that belong now to your character and travel forward with you into every relationship that follows. They are still contributing to your life, even now, even from whatever distance separates the living from the lost. The love does not stop at any border. It continues in you and through you and in every person you have touched, with the enlarged capacity for tenderness that those beloved people help to build inside you over all the years you shared. You carry them gently, permanently, and in carrying them, you honor them tonight and in every night that follows. That carrying is its own form of faithfulness, its own form of love that does not require their presence to remain genuine. Think now about the things that surprised you, not the planned events, not the milestones you anticipated and prepared for and moved toward with deliberate intention, but the genuine surprises. The moments when life turned in a direction you had not predicted, and that unexpected turning opened something you had not known was there waiting to be opened. The friendship that arrived in a season you weren't watching for it, from a person you would not have chosen on paper, and became one of the most sustaining connections of your life. The opportunity that presented itself sideways, from a direction entirely outside your plans, and altered the course of years you thought you already understood. The moment of unexpected grace in an entirely ordinary place. An afternoon that held no special significance on the calendar. A conversation that became profound without announcing its intention to do so. A view from a window that made something in you go quiet with recognition of beauty you weren't expecting to find. Life surprised you, despite all the planning and the reasonable expectations and the careful navigation of probability. Life found ways to be stranger and more tender and more interesting than anything you would have written for yourself. You were surprised by your own capacity, by what you turned out to be able to endure and survive and even eventually be grateful for. You were surprised by what you turned out to be able to love, by who you turned out to be able to forgive, by what you found you were still capable of after seasons when it seemed every capacity had been spent. You were surprised by kindness, by the people who appeared in the difficult moments, people you might not have predicted, individuals whose depth you had underestimated, who arrived precisely when arrival mattered most and offered exactly what was needed with a generosity that still sits warmly in your memory years later. You were surprised by your own resilience, which is different from strength. Resilience is what happens after strength runs out. It is what moves you forward on the mornings when every logical assessment suggests that forward movement should not be possible. And you have been resilient so many more times than you may have counted. So many more times than you may have given yourself credit for in the daily accounting of a life. The surprises have been gifts. Many of them, even the terrible ones, eventually. The disruptions and the unwanted detours, the losses that forced a different route, the disappointments that closed doors you were leaning against, all of them carried somewhere inside their difficult exteriors a seed of something new, a direction you would not have found on the comfortable path. a depth you would not have reached without the descent. A version of yourself that could not have emerged from an undisturbed life. The life you lived, which was not the life you planned, was fuller and stranger and more specifically yours for every deviation. Now, in this quiet, I want you to consider the courage you have shown. Not the dramatic, visible courage of singular defining moments, though perhaps there was some of those too, but the sustained, private, undramatic courage of continuing, day following day, season following difficult season, the courage of getting up on the mornings when getting up felt genuinely impossible and doing it anyway, not because you felt strong, but because there was no other acceptable option. The courage of staying in the relationships that required more than you felt you had available and finding more anyway. The courage of going back into the world after loss, after failure, after the kind of comprehensive disappointment that makes the whole enterprise of living feel briefly unsafe, and discovering that the world, however changed, was still there and still worth entering. This kind of courage is invisible. It announces nothing. It collects no recognition. It happens entirely in private, in the earliest and most unwitnessed hours of difficult mornings, in the internal negotiations between the part of you that wanted to surrender and the quieter but ultimately stronger part that kept insisting on continuation. It happens in the thousands of small, uncelebrated moments when you chose to remain open rather than to close, chose to stay soft enough to still be hurt rather than to harden completely, chose to remain present in your own life rather than to disappear into the numbing safety of not caring anymore. You chose to keep caring through everything. You chose to remain the kind of person who can still be moved, still be heard, still be delighted, still be surprised by beauty, still be genuinely present in the ongoing experience of being alive. In a world that offers many compelling invitations toward protective withdrawal, toward the closed heart and the defended interior and the comfortable distance of cynicism, you chose the more difficult and more generous path. You chose to remain in contact with your own life. That is courage. It is the deepest kind. Let it be recognized tonight, not by anyone else, not with any external acknowledgement, but by you here in the privacy of this review. Let it be counted clearly among the things you have given to your own life, because courage given only to yourself still matters. It may matter most of all. And now, lying here with the blankets warm and your body heavy and the room perfectly still, let the review arrive at the present, not the past, here, now, tonight. This version of yourself that is lying in this bed, reviewing and reflecting and remembering, carrying the full weight of a life and finding, despite everything, a way to rest. Who are you now? Not who were you. Not who did you plan to become. Not who do other people see from the outside. Who are you here in this most private interior version of yourself, in the dark where no performance is required and no explanation is owed? You are, before anything else, experienced, not in the casual sense, but in the profound, irreplaceable sense of having moved through decades of actual living and emerged on the other side carrying something that no amount of intelligence or education or talent can substitute for. You have context. You understand things about how people work, about how time works, about how suffering and joy and love and loss actually feel from the inside, that took a full human life to learn, and that cannot be shortened or shortcut or transferred by any other means. You know which fears are worth your attention, and which are simply the anxious noise of a mind that has not yet learned to trust its own survival. You know which relationships restore you, and which quietly take without giving back. You know how to wait, how to endure the suspended seasons when nothing seems to be happening and everything is quietly changing. How to find the quality of stillness inside turbulence that only people who have been through turbulence repeatedly and survived it repeatedly can find. You are more patient than you once were. Life insisted on teaching this, and you learned it. You have discovered that most urgencies soften with time, that most crises pass, that most things which feel like endings eventually reveal themselves as transitions into something that was necessary and sometimes even better. You have learned not to spend yourself entirely on the emergencies that resolve themselves, to conserve something for the slow and sustained work that life's real challenges actually require. You are wiser. This deserves to be said clearly and without qualification. Wisdom is not the automatic gift of simply having aged. It is the particular reward of having aged while paying genuine attention, while remaining willing to be changed by what life was showing you, while choosing repeatedly and sometimes at real cost to understand rather than simply to endure. You have done that work, imperfectly, inconsistently, but honestly, and across a long span of time. And the result is a quality of knowing that lives not in your memory, but in your instincts, in your bones, in the quiet and confident authority of your own long experience. This wisdom radiates outward from you whether you are aware of it or not. It lives in the particular quality of your listening when someone you love is struggling, in what you notice that others miss, in the specific comfort you are able to offer because you have been in the difficult place they are standing, and you know from the inside that it is survivable. You are the evidence of survival simply by being here, simply by continuing. Every person who has watched you navigate the hard seasons of your life has been given something by that watching, whether they recognized it or named it or not. There is one final thing the Bedtime Review must offer. It is the most important thing, more essential than the acknowledgement of mistakes, or the honoring of losses, or even the recognition of love. And it is this: your permission to be at peace with the whole of the story. Not a perfect story, not a story without its regrets, without its grief, without the chapters you would compose differently if revision were possible. Not a tidy story with clean resolutions and satisfying conclusions at every turn. Not a finished story, because you are still in it, still living it, still adding to it each day that the body and the world allow. But a real story, Your story, lived by you alone, in the only way it could have been lived, which was one day following the next, with the understanding and the resources available in each particular moment, without the advantage of hindsight, without the comfort of knowing in advance how things would turn out, moving forward through genuine uncertainty with as much honesty and courage and love as you could bring to bear. That story deserves your peace. It deserves your acceptance, not the exhausted acceptance of someone who has given up hoping for better, but genuine and full acceptance. The kind that comes from really seeing clearly and recognizing that the story is yours, that you are the story, that the imperfections and the unexpected turns and the losses and the things that went differently than you planned were not interruptions to the life you were meant to live. They were the life. They constituted its actual substance. They were where the deepest things happened, where the most essential learning took place, where love proved itself under conditions that required something real rather than something comfortable. You're allowed to rest in this tonight, to stop reviewing the story for what it lacked and simply to hold it, to hold yourself inside it, with the same gentleness and patience you would offer to any person you loved deeply, who had lived as much and carried as much and continued as faithfully as you have. You have showed up for your own life, however imperfectly, however inconsistently, however often you fell short of the person you intended to be on any given day. You kept showing up. You kept arriving. You kept choosing to remain present in the ongoing experience of being alive in this world. And that showing up, that sustained and uncelebrated return to the work of living, is the whole story. That is what the story of a life is made of. Not the grand moments, the return, the daily, quiet, faithful return. The review is complete for tonight, not because everything has been seen. There is always more. A life as rich as yours could fill 1,000 nights of this kind of reflection and still have more to offer. But because the body is asking now for rest, because the mind has done its honest and generous work for this evening and deserves to soften into sleep, because the practice of the bedtime review is not about reaching the end of the story. It is about the nightly ritual of returning to it, of looking, of honoring, of coming back to yourself before the dark takes you into its restorative care. You will return to this tomorrow night. Different memories will be waiting. Different layers will be ready to surface and be seen. Different corners of the long and full story will offer themselves for acknowledgement. This practice deepens over time. It becomes, with each night's returning, more natural and more generous and more genuinely sustaining. It becomes the thing that settles you, the thing that reminds you when the day has been difficult and the world has felt indifferent, that you are not a person without history, that you are not a person whose life lacks meaning, that you are, in fact, someone who has lived something extraordinary, who carries something irreplaceable, who has been loved and has loved in return and has made a mark on the world that may not be visible from the outside but is permanently real. Each time you do this, something settles. Some small piece of unfinished business finds its completion. Some long-held tension quietly releases, without drama, like a knot loosening itself in the dark while you rest. Some part of yourself that has been waiting patiently to be acknowledged finally receives that acknowledgement and becomes, rather than a source of restlessness, simply another thread in the whole cloth of who you are. This is how a life is fully inhabited, not only by living it, though that is the necessary thing, but by returning to it, by looking at it with patience and honesty and love, by refusing to let the years pass without the gentle, sustaining act of witnessing what they contained. You were there for all of it, the luminous chapters and the devastating ones, the seasons of abundance and the seasons of loss, the relationships that became the center of everything and the ones you are still trying to fully understand, the decades of labor and the hard-won seasons of rest, the moments of grace that arrived without warning and the long stretches of ordinary time that turned out, looked at from here, to have been the most precious time of all. You were there, alive and present, and genuinely inhabiting your singular, unrepeatable, irreplaceable life. And you are here now, in this bed, in this room, in this body that has served you faithfully through every season, that carries its age and its history and its accumulated wisdom in its very bones, and that is still, even now, breathing for you. Still, even now, keeping you in the world one more night, so that you can lie here in this darkness and review what the world has given you and given back to it in return. Let your body release completely now. Every last held thing, the small tightness at the corners of your eyes, the slight guarding still present somewhere in your chest, the almost imperceptible holding in your hands, let it all go. Let gravity have everything. Let the mattress hold you fully, completely, without any contribution from your own effort. You do not have to hold yourself up anymore tonight. You are held by the bed, by the dark, by the unbroken thread of care that has run through your entire life in the form of every person who has ever loved you, by the life you have built around yourself over all these extraordinary years. You are held. Rest now inside that holding. Let the memories that visited you tonight settle like leaves on still water, drifting down to the quiet depths where they live. Let the faces that came to you grow soft at their edges. Let the questions that surfaced dissolve back into the gentle hum of a resting mind. Let the wisdom you carry continue its slow and faithful work in the dark, making connections, finding meanings, doing the deep interior processing that sleep accomplishes in ways that waking never quite can. Trust this. Trust the process that has been working inside you for every year of your long and genuine life. Trust the night. Trust this bed. Trust the body that knows exactly what it needs and is asking for it now, clearly and without ambiguity, in the heaviness of your limbs and the slowing of your thoughts, and the way the room has grown softer around you, even as nothing in it has changed. You are exactly where you are supposed to be, in this life, in this moment, in this night that is holding you as carefully as you have held everything and everyone you have ever loved. That is everything. That is the whole of it. That is enough. The fires die down. The stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.